So Alabama's still looking for a new offensive coordinator, and it sounds like Nick Saban is zeroing in on his guy. Now, you remember a couple of days ago, reportedly Ryan Grubb, the offensive coordinator at Washington, turned down the job. Met with Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa, was on campus. He helped quarterback Michael Penix Jr. become the nation's leading passer at 357 yards per game a season ago. And that would have been an outstanding option for Alabama if Grubb had said yes. But he did not say yes. He said he was going back to be with Caleb DeBoer and a good, experienced Washington team that has Michael Penix returning this year. And so it kind of sent Nick Saban back to the drawing board. He appears, according to multiple reports, to be zeroing in on Notre Dame offensive coordinator Tommy Rees. Now, Tommy Rees has been at Notre Dame since the 2017 season. It's the only college program where he has held a full-time coaching position. He worked as a staffer with, San Diego for 1 year. I think that was in 2016. He, of course, played quarterback at Notre Dame from 2010 to 2013. Rees would be the youngest offensive coordinator that has worked, the youngest coordinator, period, at 30 years old that has worked for Nick Saban since Will Muschamp at LSU in 2002. So it's been a while. That was 22 years ago when Nick Saban had a 30-year-old or younger coordinator. He was the quarterback's coach for 3 years under Brian Kelly, then was elevated to the offensive coordinator position, stayed on with Marcus Freeman in that role. Notre Dame's offense evolved this year. Maybe devolved this year would be a better way to describe it. They turned to more of a ground-based approach after their starting quarterback, Tyler Buckner, was injured in week 2. And you remember there were a couple of weeks there, especially early in the season, Notre Dame just looked lost offensively. Now, they kind of regained some identity and figured it out and played a good bit better down the stretch this year. But in the 2 years under Tommy Rees prior to this season, they were pretty good offensively, averaged about 6 yards a play. And so, Borky, you and I were talking about this earlier today, and you said you felt like this was maybe a little bit of a mindset shift for Nick Saban if he were to bring in Tommy Rees. Is that based on what you saw this year or a larger picture of what you've seen?
A larger picture. And what's so interesting about this is maybe things change when the players change. Notre Dame doesn't have Alabama players, but Notre Dame also doesn't have bad players either. In quarterback development and offense has been fine, good in some cases. Mid to upper 50s into the 60s in terms of total offense, those kind of metrics. They've been fine, but that's all they've been. And Alabama, since Lane Kiffin, Sark, even Bill O'Brien, those guys have had dynamic offenses at Alabama. They have used dynamic playmakers. They've had dynamic quarterbacks. They have been explosive and dynamic. There's none of those adjectives can you use to describe what Notre Dame has done the last 3 years. It's been more traditional. Like you said, they kind of had the run the dang ball mentality this year.
And had an elite tight end, and they used the tight end extensively.
Makes me wonder if there's a philosophical change maybe. Maybe Nick Saban wants to slow the games down a little bit. Wants to get back to more controlling the football, not rushing through possessions. I don't know, because that's what this kind of tells me is happening. Or, to him, it's best available. Because he's already been turned down at least once. I would venture to guess that that wasn't the first one, because that's never how it goes. So maybe this is, in his mind, best available. I don't know, but it's interesting because this is not somebody that you get excited about if you're an Alabama fan. It's probably going to work.
Fifth offensive coordinator at Alabama since Lane Kiffin left prior to the 2017 College Football Playoff National Championship game.
Yeah.
They've had Steve Sarkisian, had Mike Loxley, they've had Brian Daboll, and most recently Bill O'Brien.
As Ryan pointed out to us yesterday, that list is the head coach at Ole Miss, the head coach at Texas, the head coach at Maryland, the head coach of the New York Giants, the offensive coordinator for the New England Patriots. I mean, that is who they have had. Is Rees that guy, though? Don't know. Because all of the all of the other guys had a resume that was more excitable than this one. Now, it's still it's still a big boy pull, right? I mean, if you're going into Notre Dame and stealing their coach, that shows where you are as a program. But I have a feeling the Alabama fans that absolutely hated Bill O'Brien aren't going to really be in love with this one either.
We get a question that says, has anybody ever said no to Saban? He must have been shocked. Yes, I'm sure that he has been told no. It's generally not super public, though. And look, I mean, Nick Saban has probably talked to guys that it hasn't released. Their names haven't been out there. But Nick Saban also hasn't been in a huge hurry to do this. Right? I mean, it was after signing day when Bill O'Brien announced that he was returning to New England to be with Bill Belichick. It was after signing day when Ole Miss hired Pete Golding away from Alabama. And there hasn't been a big rush because the majority of Alabama's signing class was in place. So no big issue there. By the way, complete aside, I'm interrupting. Mississippi State alum Chad Ramey, tied for third at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am. He shot 7 under in difficult, windy, cold conditions at Pebble Beach. They used 3 courses for the first 3 rounds, and then they played the weekend at Pebble. Spanish Bay, Spyglass, and Pebble Beach. Anyway, it may not be Spanish Bay. Maybe it's Spyglass, and it doesn't matter. Anyway, Chad Ramey tied for third, 7 under today. Played really well. 1 shot off the lead. I completely lost my train of thought talking on Alabama. Sorry. I just saw that on the Golf Channel as we were standing there. I was like, oh, yeah, Mississippi native. Should mention him. So, yeah, good stuff from Chad Ramey. But, no, I mean, Nick Saban's talked to guys. I guess the point was being not in a rush. Right? I mean, yesterday, National Signing Day was nothing. I'm assuming that Alabama added a couple of players, but I don't know who they were. And, it's not like their signing class got any better based on adding a couple of guys yesterday. It's already quite good. Number 1 class in the country. It's a really appealing job to go be the offensive coordinator for Nick Saban. Based on what we just said, Borky, the history of his offensive coordinators. And frankly, the history of his coordinators, period. Kirby got the job at Georgia. Jim McElwain, former offensive coordinator, got a job at Florida. Mike Loxley got the job at Alabama. Lane Kiffin's at Ole Miss after going to FAU. Sark's at Texas. There's a reason you go and you work for a guy who's really hard to work for and has really high expectations. Because if you go there and succeed, you're going to have the opportunity to be a head coach. Bill O'Brien goes back to the NFL. Pete Golding takes a step, and he's defensive coordinator at another spot in the SEC. He's able to add another significant line to his resume. So we'll see with Tommy Rees.